A Warner Brothers television production.
Okay, I think that's right. The next clip we're going to run features two of our guests because these two go so far back and have been friends for so long, and we just felt like we wanted to introduce them together. I believe this is a scene from a wagon train called The Kate Parker Story. And as I remember, they're stuck in the snow, and there's some chance that Ruta's character might pass away, and Mr. Jess Harper, that's not Jess Harper.
Chris.
The character he was playing on Wagon Train, whatever that was at the time.
Chris.
Anyway, he was out to try to save her, and had to go get help or something. And I think there's a scene that involves that.
It's freezing out there, isn't it?
Colder than a polar bear's toes. Haven't you got anything you can wear?
Girl doesn't need warm clothes in a saloon.
Abby, that's over with, remember? We're not talking about it anymore.
Well, I think some of the women know about me. Anyway, they're snickering behind my back.
You let them snicker. It'll be different when we get to San Francisco. The new life. Here, put this around you.
You and your ruffled shirt, you look so out of place.
City slicker with a hit job. Guess we're going to leave town. Now, my other coat. With the scarf, you'll be warm enough.
But Chris, I look so silly. Well, I don't have to be out there with you when you're driving.
When I drive, when I walk, sit or stand, sleep or wake. Every minute of my life.
And I can deal somebody a cold deck?
That's ancient history, too. Shut up, Mrs. Finley.
Come on, let's go.
Let's introduce Ms. Ruta and Mr. Robert Fuller.
Are the best gentlemen in the world. Thank you, darling.
Oh, thanks for that great kiss.
How many takes
And
were?
boy, as many as I could do. I flubbed those lines more than you can imagine just to do that scene.
Let's see it again.
I promise I'm
Soft.
going to introduce Mr. Walmsley in just a second. But have you all seen that picture of them that goes way back with them holding hands back in the 50s?
Yes.
Have you seen that picture?
Uh-huh.
That's a treasure.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, certainly last but not least, first time guest at our festival, Mr. John Walmsley was on the Waltons for however long the series ran. Played the number 2 son on there, Jason. And I think we have a clip from the Waltons here. Please welcome Mr. John Walmsley. Now, the first thing I've got to say is I was out at the airport waiting for Mr. Walmsley when some of you did this panel the other day. So I don't know what you talked about, and I may bring up things that have already been brought up. So forgive me if I do. Okay, Mr. Conrad, tell me how you got the role on Wild Wild West.
Well, thank you all. It's been a great panel.
If you weren't here for that, you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, I'll start with Mr. Walmsley. I understand you were born in England.
I was.
So what brought you here?
My parents.
Mr. Conrad. Well, I mean, what was the circumstance?
My family were from the north of England, where it's very cold and rainy and wet. And my mother decided that she would like to live in the California sunshine. So she said, and her uncle was living in San Diego, and as my mother likes to say, he said, "It's a wonderful place to bring up a child." And so we were off.
Did either of your parents have any kind of theatrical background?
No, not really. My parents weren't in entertainment. Some other members of her family were aunts and uncles, but they were musical. But no, my parents were completely caught off guard when I went into music and acting. They were not prepared for that at all.
And what precipitated that?
Well, I started in music because, I was always interested, but I particularly loved the Beatles, who came from the part of England that we were from, the Northwest. And that inspired me to play guitar. And I started doing little shows, playing guitar and singing, and then I was invited to audition for a TV show. So
We'll talk about
that kind of got the ball rolling.
We'll talk about that in a minute, but Mr. Fuller, you've done a lot of these panels, and maybe this has come up before, I don't know, but I didn't know that you actually started out as a dancer.
Yes, I did. I don't know if everybody else knows that or not, but my parents were dancers.
They had a dancing school, right?
They had a dancing school in Key West, Florida, and when they moved to California, my dad got in the motion picture business in 1950 as a dancer, and he danced in every musical that was ever made, including movies that you were in, Ruta, until he retired in 87. And since they were dancers, of course, they taught me how to dance. But when I started out as an extra, I was making $12.05 a day working extra. My dad was making $250 a week on a dance show that would, one dance number was 3 weeks rehearsal and a week to shoot it. So he was doing very, very well. And he said, you know how to dance a little bit, go on a dance audition. Well, I did. I went on an audition for a movie called I Love Melvin, starring Donald O'Connor and Debbie Reynolds, and got the job. I danced in 3 or 4 numbers in that and did a specialty number with Debbie, and actually worked in a lot of musicals. I danced with Marilyn Monroe and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Lana Turner and Ricardo Montalban in Latin Lovers. Danced with Sid Charisse and Meet Me in Las Vegas, which I'll never forget. And
I want to hear more about that. Those long legs of hers, what did they do?
Were they something? My God, you know. Yeah. She was the best dancer in Hollywood, period.
Did you have any musical training before you got into films, Miss Lee?
I was in high school still when I got into my first movie, which was 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, and it's one of the great classic movies now of all time. I'm happy to say that 2 of the movies that I was in, I starred in neither, but had pivotal roles, were 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. Witness for the Prosecution are 2 movies that are considered the top 100 ever made. And I'm very proud of that, you know. that one of them was a Western, a musical Western, and the other one was certainly not. It was very Eastern England.
Mr. Colbert, I believe you got your start acting while you were in the service in Korea. Is that correct?
Okinawa. I went over there, and I think Bob was in Korea. I went by Korea while he was there. Went by there, and no, I was there in '54. I was there before you. But I went on to Okinawa after Korea, and in Korea it was about 40 below zero every breath you took, and I couldn't wait to get down to Okinawa, the 38th parallel, and I started scuba diving right away. And I was making a fast $30 a month, so I had a chance to get a job at this radio station, KSPK Shuri Okinawa, Radio Free Asia. And I got up there 4 hours a night, $2 an hour. I had $8 a day. I was rich. And the richest guy in the Army, I thought. So it enabled me to travel all through the Southeast and everything. And I had a wonderful time getting my start there on Okinawa.
I read somewhere that you were in some production over there.
Yeah, the Cane Mutiny.
Court Martial.
Yeah, I played Greenwald in the Cane Mutiny Court Martial. I've never seen lyrics like that since. It was an amazing experience. I stood on that stage reading Herman Wouk's lines, and it was just almost breathtaking for me. I went, boy, I was hooked. I just couldn't wait to see if I could go further in that business because of those beautiful words. And so I got out of the service in '56, and I signed up with the Portland Civic Theater and worked there, and then we formed a thing called the Portland Repertory Theater. And I did some plays, and Mickey Shaughnessy and a friend of, I'm sure, both Bob and Ruta was a friend of mine. I met him up there. His name was Mark Platt. Remember him, Ruta?
Seven Brides, and he also
Seven
danced
Brides.
with Rita Hayworth in CoverGirl.
Right.
That was Mark Platt doing all that dancing.
So between the two of them, they encouraged me to keep going in show business, and Mickey brought me down, and I told him the other day I hadn't had anything to show these producers. I walk in this room, I got 12 people at Mickey's agency saying, "Okay, kid, what do you do?" I go, "Well, you know, what could we look at?" Well, I didn't have anything to show them. So I had just written a poem, and I said, "I could recite a poem for you." You can imagine the excitement in the room.
The exciting part I want to throw in is that Bob is really a romantic at heart, and he has a great love of language and the verbiage in poetry, and he does beautiful, beautiful poems. And I'm hoping that he will put a book together someday for everybody because it's lovely.
I'd like to see that too.
That might. I haven't got anything to do.
Mr. Walmsley, before you got on the Waltons, you did some other acting. You were on some shows like Daniel Boone, Adam 12, I think, and some others.
Yes, I did a few guest roles. My first one was on a show called Combat with Vic Morrow, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I mean, I think maybe I'd been in a school play, but I had no clue. And I have to say, he was not very patient with me. And we were waiting off the set to make an entrance into this scene. This was an episode. You might wonder how I got to be in a combat episode, but it had to do with being English, actually, because this was the one episode where Sergeant Saunders was on furlough, and he went to England. And the first scene in the show, they're still on the battlefield in Europe, and one of the soldiers gets killed, and he takes a letter on his furlough to England to deliver this letter to this guy's fiancée. and the fiance was Carol Lawrence.
Oh.
And an actor named John Williams was in that episode too, an older character actor, wonderful. And anyway, so there's this scene where Carol Lawrence is running an orphanage in London. All these little English kids, so that's how I got the job. But, because I still had my accent a little bit. But we were supposed to enter this little courtyard where she's teaching an art class, and we're waiting outside the door. We're waiting for that little red light to go on so we can open the door and go in. I didn't have the first idea, and I kept screwing up, take after take. This is my first scene ever, and we're standing out there waiting for the red light to come on. Vic Morrow said, "Hey kid," said, your dad a writer?" I said, "No." He said, your mom a producer or one of them a director or something?" I said, "No." He said, "How'd you get this job?" And I didn't really get, I was so young, I didn't even get that he was being mean. And I said, "Well, I guess they just liked me."
And they still do, honey.
I got better after that. A little bit anyway.
Mr. Fuller, I read that one of your early mentors was Richard Boone. Would you talk about that?
Sure, I'd love to. I had gotten in the picture business in 1952 as an extra, and worked 52, 53. I was 19 years old. The Korean War was on. I got drafted, and had to leave the Extras Guild and go in the Army, which I did for 2 years. Spent 17 months in Korea. When I came, I should preface this by saying I had no education. Kicked out of school in the 9th grade twice, and just started working. So I had no formal education or didn't know what I was going to do. So when I got out of the Army in 1955, I thought, boy, what am I going to do? I've got to get some kind of job that's going to give me a future. I'm going to get out of the Extras Guild because that's not going to do me any good. But my dear best friend at that time was an actor named Chuck Courtney, who played Dan Reed on The Lone Ranger television series. And he said, "No, you're not getting out of the business. A new guy has come to town, and he's teaching acting, and his name is Richard Boone." This was way before Have Gun Will Travel. And he said, "You've got to get in this class. You're going to like this man." So I said, "All right, I'll go one night to your class." He was teaching 3 nights a week. So I went to sit in. I sat way in the back. There was only about 12 people in the class. And finally, after a few of them had done their scenes, Dick Boone said, "I see my Army guy has come back. Come on up here." And I walked up, and Dick said, "Will you do an improvisation?" And I didn't know what an improvisation was. And I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, I'm going to pick a girl out of the class, and I'll give you a story, an idea, and you go back for a couple of minutes and figure it out and come and do it in front of the class." And I said, "Sure." So I went and I did it. And I had no idea what I was doing. And we did it. They critiqued it a little bit. And after the class was over, as Dick always did since for years after that, we wound up at a bar. He was a wild man. I love this. Dick Boone is one of the most fabulous people in the world. But anyway, we go to a bar not too far from where we were doing class. And Dick came up to me and he said, "Bob," he said, "I think you've got a chance to be an actor. I want you to study. I want you to be in my class." And I said, "Dick, how do you know that? Why?" And he says, "I just have a feeling. I'm telling you, I want you to study with me." He was charging $30 a month for 3 nights a week for all of these kids to learn acting. So I joined the class. To go on just for a second on it, the next week later, Charlie Bronson comes to the class. We've got myself, Chuck Courtney, and another buddy of mine, Jerry Summers, who was on High Chaparral later on, a stuntman too. And Dick Boone, he loved to get actors to get rid of their inhibitions. And of course, God knows we had inhibitions at that time. And Dick all of a sudden points to Jerry, Chuck, and myself, and he says, "Come up, get up on the floor right here." And there was a table out there, and they said, I want the two of you to become kittens, and play underneath this table. I'm 20 years old, just out of Korea, not wanting to play a kitten. But anyway, we're in acting class, so we're going to go. So Chuck and Jerry and I, we go down on the ground, we go meow, meow, and they said, that's not kittens. Dick Boo is very forceful. He said, I want to see kittens. Well, finally, Chuck and Jerry and I looked at each other and said, let's give him kittens. And we started going crazy on the thing. About that time, Charlie Bronson went out the door. Never came back to that class. But anyway, make it quick. I studied with Dick, this was 1955. Studied with him, and all of a sudden he got to have a little travel. He would come to work in his wardrobe, come to class in wardrobe at night, still teaching us. And he liked what I did. He sent me back to New York to study with Sandy Meisner. I did a year at the neighborhood playhouse back there. Came back in 1956 and started my first great movie, Teenage Thunder.
Wow.
That's about Dick movie.
And since you mentioned Teenage Thunder, I heard or read that Ed Burns was up for that part, and that you and Chuck Courtney staged a fight that changed their minds about who was going to get the part.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell it quickly. Ed Burns. Eddie, he wasn't kooky yet, but we were just sort of touching the fan magazine scenes at that time, done a couple little tiny things, and Chuck was going to star in a movie called Teenage Thunder. And Paul Helmuth was going to be the director. And Chuck said, I want you to meet Paul because there's a great part for the heavy, the second lead in it. And I went and I read with him at his house one night. And I guess, I don't know what I did, but I did what I did. And the next day Chuck said, well, there's a heavy actor guy that plays heavies in town, a new guy named Ed Burns. And he's very interested in Ed Burns. And I said, well, yeah, okay. He said, but no, I want you to do it. He said, let's go back and read again. So we called Paul Helmuth, and we go and I read again for Paul Helmuth. And Paul kind of likes, you know what I do, but back in his mind, he's got this much heavier type bad guy to play against Chuck, who's a young, good-looking guy in the thing. So anyway, it doesn't work. It looks like Ed Burns is going to get the part. So Chuck has an idea. He says, look, you know the scene in the script where you drive up in the convertible and we have the fight at the gas station and I throw the thing in your face and we get out and we fight. He said, why don't we do that for real in front of Paul? I'll have him come to the house tomorrow morning. You park your convertible down the street. I'll have the bucket of water. and when Paul gets up and pulls out of his car, you'll see it. You drive up, and we do the scene, and we do the fight, because it's a big fight scene. And Chuck and I could do pretty good fight stuff. I said, let's go. So the next morning, Saturday morning, I'm parked in my when I got out of the Army, I had enough money to buy a 1950 Ford convertible. And so I had it. And I'm parked down the street, and Chuck's house is in North Hollywood. And sure enough, 10 o'clock, here comes Paul Helmuth, parks his car, walks across the street. Chuck's giving me the cue, and I scream up here on that thing, pull a big screech, and the dirt's flying and this and that. We jump, and we play the scene. Fight, I jump out of the car, we do the whole fight scene, and this man's standing here just like, he cannot believe what is going on. And as soon as it's all over, we're soaking wet with the fight. He says, you got the part. and that's how I got to
Did Ed Burns ever forgive you?
Probably not. Who cares?
Ms. Lee, did you have a mentor that helped you get into the business?
Well, when I was very young, first of all, I was born in Montreal, Canada. So like you, John, I arrived in California. My mother thought I was Lithuania's answer to Shirley Temple. She said, "Oh, my kid can do that," and she didn't know anything about theater or acting schools or anything else. But by happenstance, we met up with a character actress named Laura Casely Brooks, who was 5 by 5, and she taught she took a few students in her little apartment and would do scenes, and every once in a while she would take either the room at the ladies' club, what the hell was it called? The Studio Club in Hollywood, or a hotel room somewhere, and she would do a little performance of scenes for casting directors, agents, directors, whatever came down the pike. And at one of these things, I did a scene, and I was, I think, innately a decent actress. I could turn on the tears like that, which was very impressive, at the time. And Ivan Kahn was the head of 20th Century Fox talent at the time. He didn't come to this, but his secretary did. And she suggested that they put me into some kind of a training program or something. And so I went into 20th Century Fox. And there are very few people in this world that I dislike or even hate. But there is one. And her name was Helena Sorrell. And Helena Sorrell, along with Natasha Lytess, you might know these names, were the coaches at 20th Century Fox. Natasha was a decent woman. She's the one that worked with Marilyn Monroe. But Helena Sorrell, I think, was pissed that the secretary had me come in rather than her approving something. And so it was like, instead of giving me a good dramatic scene, because Ivan Kahn looked at me, and I was all of, 13, I think, said, this could be the new Anne Baxter, because I was a decent dramatic actress for a very, very young girl. Well, this woman kept writing stupid little fluffy pieces of crap for me to do. And that was not what I was good at. I wasn't good at this sort of thing. I was good at nitty gritty. And long story short, that my test was caca. But boy, it was the first time I had eyelashes on, and I was so thrilled. It was so marvelous. I don't think I took them off for a week. And they kept me under contract for a while, but this was in the early 50s when the studios were breaking up, and they were letting go of all the studio contractees, and I was the first to go. So I had kind of an interesting beginning at 20th, but I had to thank Laura Casely Brooks, who nobody ever heard of, for kind of giving me the guidelines and the ropes for how to do something.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Walmsley, how did the part Jason Walton come to you?
This was 1971, and I was in high school. My mother picked me up after school. I was 15, and she said, "We're going to CBS. You have an audition for a TV movie," which was kind of a new concept at that point. And I said, "Oh, great." He said, "Yeah, they want a red-haired boy with freckles." I thought, good. Who plays the harmonica? So she said, "I brought your harmonica." I said, "Okay, great." And in my head, on the way to CBS, I was thinking, a lot of times these TV movies end up being pilots for series. That's what they were doing at that point. It was kind of a new thing. And so that was in my head. And I went, I read a few lines for the producer and Earl Hamner, the creator who was there, and I played the harmonica a little bit, and obviously I ended up getting the part. But Earl told me later, he said, "You got the part because you look more like my own son than my son does." So I thought that was really sweet. But it's funny because I didn't know until just a few years ago that there was no intention of the Homecoming, as it was called, the Christmas special, being made into a series. The reason that the Homecoming was made into a series is because in 1972, Congress were putting pressure on the networks, this network being CBS, to produce more family-oriented programming. And so these executives are sitting around at a board meeting. They said, "Okay, what do we got? What can we give them that'll placate the Congress?" And somebody said, "Well, that Christmas special was pretty good. We could probably do something with that." So they actually approached Earl and the producers. Can you give us a series from that movie? And he said, "Of course." And that was it.
I wish Congress were doing the same thing now.
Yeah.
That really is. That's super.
Since you mentioned that, I mean, there was a period on TV with the Western shows where there was pressure to tame down the violence. Did you ever encounter that, either one of you?
Oh, Bob and I both did. Go ahead, Bob.
No, I had nothing to say on that subject. I didn't have any problem with that.
You didn't. Well, I did. Well, in 1959 when Laramie started, there wasn't a Laramie if I didn't kill 6 guys and beat the heck out of 9. It wasn't a Laramie. And then the next year, I could only shoot 4 guys and beat up 3 guys. And the changes would come in the scripts. Our scripts are colored. White page is your first script, yellow page, green page, blue page, and every page that came to you, everything was cut down as far as action. I don't call it violence. It was. I never hit anybody over the head with my .45 and that. I shot him for what I'm saying. I shot the way it should be shot. It wasn't violent. It was the way it's supposed to be. But anyway, by the 3rd season of Laramie, the FCC, Teddy Kennedy, and the Parent Teachers Association had got against us so well. The PTA went to Teddy, and he went to the FCC, and violence or not action stopped in our pictures. I might as well have been carrying a purse in the last show. I'm telling you, you all know that. You all watch Laramie. Am I not right or wrong? The people that watch this show, all the stuff was cut out.
The sad part is, it was the bad guys who got shot. We had a lesson and a moral lesson in every single show.
That's why the DVDs of Laramie and Wagon Train and all our old westerns that we did are doing so well today for a new generation that are seeing it, and it's a good message. I shouldn't say message. I hate the word message about a TV show, but it's a good lesson to see on our shows.
A lot better lesson than the friggin' reality shows we're watching today. Instead of the best and the heroism that you were taught and the morals that you were taught, our children were taught, today we are looking at the sleaziest, crummiest of America, and it's going all over the world, and I'm embarrassed by it.
I am too.
And of course, it's all about money. They don't have to pay these so-called reality stars the kind of money that accomplished actors are supposed to get. So
I hate to tell you what the women on Housewives of Beverly Hills are getting. It's a lot more than any of us earned, even at the top of our earning things. They're making that much more. It's just unbelievable.
do you know, I've never seen it and won't, but there's some show on one of these channels, and the premise is people are engaged in sexual activity and have an emergency and have to go to the emergency room to get uncoupled or something. That's the premise.
Wait a minute, what's the name of that show?
I'm going to let you ask some questions. You must ask a question.
I knew we would get good.
Okay, get the mic, yeah. Anybody got one? Right here. Lady down front.
This question is from Miss Lee. We were talking yesterday, you said to ask a question about James Oness.
Because I have these wonderful pictures with Big Jim. In case a lot of you aren't aware of this, that long before he was Matt Dillon, he was in a sci-fi movie that to me is still one of the best that was ever made early on, called The Thing. And he was the thing. He was the carrot. Isn't that something? Anyway, I have to tell this story. I did several of those episodes, and in this particular one, I think the character name was Jenny, and I was a bit of a tart. And I was a young tartlet that was staying at Miss Kitty's saloon, and there weren't doors on the bedrooms, there were curtains, on the hallway. And I was tucked in a little bed, and I enticed the sheriff to come and sort of be nice with me, and I was going to tease him and bring him into bed, at which point he throws a quilt over my head, throws me over his shoulder, and the script calls for him to take me down the hall to Miss Kitty's room and plop me there. Okay, he comes in, come in, sheriff, blah, 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 blah. Quilt overhead, Ruta over shoulder. He swings the curtain, thereby smacking my head against the door, and lively kicking Ruta goes out like a light. She falls to the floor and wakes up I don't know how much later, with everybody hovering, and Big Jim with tears running down his eyes, just saying, "Oh baby, did I kill you? Are you alright? Are you okay?" Do you know how I cherish that moment? It seems I get knocked out easily. On Seven Brides, the first day that we, after like 6 or 8 weeks of rehearsal for that big barn raising number, we were in our new shoes that we were going to be dancing in, and we walk out on the plank floor to try the floor out and rehearse, and we're doing these things, and it's a very physical, hectic dance, as you well know, Bobby. And one of the big things is I leap forward and then slide back. Well, the shoes hadn't been rubberized yet. And I went forward, the head hit the floor, and again, out like a light. And I wake up to hear Michael Kidd, our fabulous choreographer, who's a New Yorker, saying, "Nah, she ain't hype. She just dropped a quarter down the crack of the wood. She's looking for it." That was the most pain I ever experienced because my head hurt, but I was laughing.
Okay, who's got a question? Here. Wait for the mic. Wait for the mic.
This is for John. Who was the biggest prankster on the Waltons?
I have to say it was one of our semi-regulars, John Bear. Yes.
Give us an example.
Oh man, well he and Richard Thomas used to get into it all the time, and they would have these what I would call gross out contests. And when one of them would be doing his close-up, the other one would be off camera, reading these lines and chewing a piece of paper so that he could drool as much as possible. That kind of thing. That went on a lot. But John was a wonderful guy. You know how sometimes when you're around funny people, they seem like they're on all the time, and you kind of get the feeling that they're maybe not that sincere, and that was not John. He was literally just a funny guy, and that was his natural way of being, but he was the most sincere, lovely guy you could ever meet.
Okay.
And we miss him.
Another question.
I was wondering if we could have a sample of the poetry.
A short one.
A short
I don't have it. Well, I don't have a short one, and Ruta's right. The one I could recite right now would probably be a little long for the room. What do you think?
Well, it's what, a 12-minute piece?
I don't think
6
it'd be
minute? It's beautiful. You should print it up and just bring it the next time you do a show for everybody, because it's so lovely. It's a Valentine of words.
So, gee, I'm sorry, folks.
Give us a short version.
I'd be happy to do
Just
it
edit
this
it.
time.
Just edit it.
What's that?
Just edit it. Yeah, just give us part of it.
All right. Well, that poem that I recited for these producers that day, I had just written because I had messed up a live performance of a commercial on NBC in Portland, and I thought I'd destroyed my career and everything. I went home and I sat down, and about the time it takes me to recite it, I wrote it. And I don't know exactly where it came from, but I call it Endeavor, and if I can remember it again, it goes, I must try to keep alive that precious hunger upon which I thrive, the ageless beauty and love of man, the thrill of life, that one brief span. Now I will seek virtues proven through time, I'll learn to fall, and I'll strive to climb, and I'll take the good and I'll make it mine, for you see, my cup is filled with life, not wine. Now the cutting blows of innuendos when given birth to hurt the fold are unleashed through vile crescendos by a very hateful heart that's cold. So I shall not fight this evil weakness with the eye for eye cliche, no. I'll ignore its ugly venom and I'll turn my thoughts another way. Now if hypocrisy must grow, well then you let it harm the ones who show they need this weakling's crutch to fight the right they fear so much. Now in expression there is mood, so let it be my daily food, for in its realm I do confess, and I find my world of tenderness. It's a thing aside from wars and strife, like a new approach to the tired life. Now the needing man might well decide to share those things he has inside. The master pen, when deft applied, can resurrect a mood that's died. It can bring to life the printed page to withstand the test of age, but how to build a heart that's strong, to do what's right or change a wrong now. These are things that I must find before I leave this life behind. And I must give vent this passion now, and I pray it does some good somehow. Perhaps just one who shares my need will give me love and take my heed. And still perchance these things I feel are real unjust or just unreal. But as I live and as I breathe, I'm going to try my way before I leave. That's it.
Buy the book.
Thank you so much, Mr. Colbert.
Now you know why I love this man.
Okay, who has a question? The lady right here.
Many of you worked with Ellen Corby. She was on the Waltons, but she was also in Westerns. So everyone who worked with her, please give us memories about her.
I guess you're the one to start, Mr. Walmsley.
Okay. I loved Ellen. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady, and we kind of adopted each other because when I started doing the Waltons, I didn't have grandparents any longer, and she had no grandchildren. So we sort of adopted each other, and I would be her escort when she would get invited to a function, an award show or something like that. So I'd go out and rent a tux and pick her up, and we'd go together, and it was great. She was always so supportive of me and my music. And one of my favorite scenes with her is the one where Jason is inspired to write a song by her ironing, and that's where the ironing board blues came from. So maybe you remember that scene, but she's doing the ironing and he starts playing along. She was just wonderful and very different, actually, than the character she played. She was, you know how traditional Grandma was. But Ellen was actually a very, very modern woman, and she had written a book, and she had traveled to India, and she meditated with the Maharishi, and she studied yoga, and she was very proud of the fact that she could bend over and put her palms on the floor. We never saw Grandma Walton do that, but that was one of her yoga stretches, so she was very special.
Anybody else have a comment about Ms. Gear?
I worked with Ellen, except I didn't work with her. I was in scenes that she wasn't in, and therefore I never even got to meet her. But you know, when all of us, or all of the characters that we know, spend as much time as we do in yours or my living room, bedroom, bathroom if you're rich, you really get to know all these characters like personal friends. And we don't become stars, we become friends and neighbors because we're invited into your homes, and Lord knows we thank you very much.
I did have the privilege of working with Ellen, and you're right, she was a delightful lady. She really was. Very professional, a lot of fun.
Yes.
And in her late days, when she was in a wheelchair, and you remember that very well, we used to go to the Golden Boot Awards.
Oh, yes.
We'd see Ellen there, and she'd always come up. And it was always a pleasure. She loved life, she loved people, and she was a fabulous actress. But I'm very lucky to have worked with her.
Yes. I'll add a couple more things. I'm thinking more things as we go along. Ellen had a very long history in Hollywood. And before she got into films, she was a script girl.
Oh.
And she was a script girl for Laurel and Hardy.
Wow.
She was a script girl for Hopalong Cassidy, who she loved. And also, I know...
in more ways than you're saying?
Well, no, I don't think it kind of went that way. But she was also very fond of Laurel and Hardy. And she referred to Oliver Hardy always as Babe. That was his nickname. And she would always refer to him as Babe. And her days as a script supervisor carried on into the Waltons, because when we were doing scenes together as a family, and especially our dinner scenes, and we had many dinner scenes where the food was being passed and people were taking bites and they were sipping coffee, and everyone had to try to remember, exactly when they took a bite or sipped the coffee, so that in the close-ups it would match. And Ellen remembered it all because she had that training. She'd say, "No, you took the pie after John Boy's line," right? And we were so thankful because she kept us all on our toes, and if we forgot, she would remember.
Eating all the time like that, did you gain weight, or?
We tried not to eat too much, and you probably know this too. When you do dinner scenes and they last all day, the food sits there and sits there and sits there, so that by the end of the day, the scrambled eggs are getting a little bit green. So we try not to. And Michael Leonard was famous for this. You will never see her take a bite of anything ever on the Waltons. She might take a forkful, she might raise it up, but then she'll put it down and say her line. You never see her put anything in her mouth, ever.
Wow, interesting.
Oh, lesson learned.
We got a question right here.
So this question is for Robert Fuller. What role are you most proud of and why?
What
role are you most proud of and why?
Are you serious? Jess Harper, there. I'm a very fortunate guy to have been able to do 3 television series and work with some of the most fantastic people in the world. But to play the character, Jess Harper, was the shot of my lifetime, and I love that man, and I am that man, and that's why I love that part so much.
I've read that your favorite cowboy was Joel McCrea, and you actually got to work with him in Mustang Country, so talk about that, would you?
Oh my God. Well, you all know Joel McCrea. It doesn't get any better. Nobody could ride a horse better than Joel McRae. Did you ever work with Joel at all?
I'm sorry to say no.
Okay, well, he's just the most incredible guy in the whole world. But anyway, he's my idol. He really is. I watched Joel growing up. And, Larry came on, Wagon Train came on, Emergency came on. And Joel McRae was getting older and had quit the business. Of course, had a ranch in Northern California. And my producer, John Champion, decided to write a movie called Mustang Country and see if he could get Joel McRae to come out of retirement and do the picture. And he asked me, he said, would you be in it? And he was close friends with Patrick Wayne also. And we both agreed we would. So, are you kidding? Got a chance to work with Joel McRae and shoot up in Canada. We shot it in Banff, Canada, which is the most gorgeous location in the world. And he agreed. He came out of retirement. And we went up there and shot this movie, and it was the most incredible experience of my life to be with this man every day, have dinner with him at night, and watch this man still mount a horse at his age better than I could mount it at my age. And it was a thrill. But I got to meet my hero and work in a movie with him, Joel McRae.
Wow.
But now, here's a very interesting thing. Of course, he's married to one of the most beautiful women in the world, Frances D.
Who we had here once.
Oh, really?
We did.
You really?
With Jody.
Oh, no kidding. Well, I worked with Jody. Jody's done a wagon train with me. But anyway, Frances was there, and I mean, what a motion picture star this lady was. And a marriage in heaven between these two people. We would go to dinner every night, Patrick Wayne, myself, Frances, and Joel, and he held hands with her all through dinner. And it was just something to see. It brings tears to my eyes when you think about it. What a life they had. Yeah. Thank you. Good.
Whoa, beautiful.
You mentioned early on your Lithuanian connections, and I read somewhere that you sort of went head to head with Nikita Khrushchev once to get a relative over here or something.
Wow, I was the first to become a citizen because I was Canadian born, and in my family the first to become a citizen of the United States. And so at that point I started making out what are called Vizovs, because my grandparents were deported when the communist regime took over all of those satellite nations of Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Hungary, everything.
Ukraine.
Got taken over by the communists, and these beautiful little farm people that didn't have a pot to pee in were deported to Siberia. My grandfather died on the cattle car, well, not on, but his legs were frozen on the cattle car that they were being deported onto Siberia. And when I talk about deportation to Siberia, it's not a 2-day trip across the United States. It's a 6-week trip across the Soviet Union, into Siberia. And in a cattle car, the same cattle cars that we see in the Holocaust films, and I must say I admire the Jews for not letting us forget that this happened, in spite of the idiots in this world that say, oh, it never happened. They don't let us forget. The problem is that Stalin, on the other hand, killed over 30 million, not 6 million, 30 million of his own people. And we, the Christians, and the Russian Orthodox and the rest, forget about this. We don't talk about it all the time. And we should be. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. I started out making out Vizovs to get my grandmother out of Siberia, where she was, and she had to spend 12 years there, and she literally hitchhiked across Siberia to find other members of our family that had been deported. And we're not talking about the beautiful people that were the educators or the money people. These are little tiny farm folk, Anyway, I tried with everybody. I tried with the Kennedy administration. I tried with everybody to do something to help me get my grandmother out. And we got word finally from my grandmother's daughter, who was writing for her, because she never went to school, my grandmother. And she was saying, she was thanking us for the packages that we used to send that sustained their lives in Siberia and then when they chose to come back to Lithuania. And she was thanking us because we sent clothes and things and whatnot that she could use, and she was dying. And half the stuff, of course, was obliterated because of the censorship, you know. And I went out with friends that night, and it was my remaining grandparent, and I would never get to meet anybody from my family. And my mother was in a spate of tears, and I went out with friends that night, and the more wine I drank, the more clear it became that I had to pick up the phone and call Khrushchev. So I did. And in those days, thank you God, we had person-to-person calling. And if you didn't get your party at the other end, you didn't have to pay for the call. Of course, they charged you twice as much if you got it. And I started placing a call to Khrushchev, and the operator said, I'd say, I want to speak to Nikita Khrushchev, the Kremlin, Moscow, USSR. And she said, how do you spell Khrushchev? Well, this bitch didn't know how. But anyway, long story short, back and forth. Would I speak with so-and-so? No. Would I speak with so-and-so? No. Mr. Khrushchev isn't available. Hours went by, and in the meantime, I'm calling the Russian embassy in Washington, saying that I want to speak to somebody that can give me papers to go, because nobody was going into those satellite countries unless you were a big, high official with the Communist Party. And I spoke to everybody from the window washer to the dishwasher to the lawnmower, whoever, and nobody would talk to me about this. Now I finally, the operator, the Russian operator calls back, and this is about the 6th call now. Mr. Khrushchev not in office available. Mr. Khrushchev not speak it English. You speak it with Mr. Warshaw, his interpreter. And I remembered that this man that she was referring to was the very handsome young man that traveled with Khrushchev when he was here in America, banging his shoe. And my father used to laugh because he'd say, that's not what Khrushchev said, what he interpreted, you know, because he was fluent. He was saying nasty things about us Americans, and Borisov was making them palatable to our wonderful Victorian ears. So I said, yes, I'll speak to him. So he said, why don't you talk, Miss Lee, we know all about you. We run your movies here in the Soviet. Why don't you speak with your congressman? And at this point, it was about 6 in the morning, and I was very unhappy. And I said, Mr. Borisov, what the hell does my congressman have to do with my traveling in your country? This is not a political matter. This is a matter of the heart. I don't even know if my grandmother is alive. It takes 2 weeks for a letter to get here. Come on. And I also want to take my parents, because they could be detained by the Soviet as primary citizens, you know, of Lithuania. And so he said, present yourself again to the Russian embassy. Now they knew. And I thought, oh, shoot, here we go again. I'm going to talk to the gardener again or something. And I called 20 minutes later, the way he told me to do, and obviously the hotlines had been flashing, because this time I was connected immediately to the first secretary. The first secretary was Lithuanian. I am fluent in Lithuanian. And long story short, 24 hours later, my papers for myself and my parents were signed and sealed for us to go to Lithuania. And it was quite a story. Time magazine, Life magazine carried it. It was the most exciting thing. And 2 well, not 2 years, 6 months later, 6 months later, after this visit, where we found my grandmother who had miraculously been moved from a little tiny town to a hospital in Kaunas, which is the secondary city in Lithuania. We walked in, the entire hospital was in a spate of tears because of this beautiful, recovery of a grandparent. And I went back on my own to get her 6 months later when she was in condition to travel, and I brought her to the United States. And here's the thing that I want to share with you that is so important to me that I want us to pass on to every young person we ever know. That 90 God knows what old lady, we didn't have jetways then, walked down the stairs of the plane, dropped to her knees, kissed the ground, and said, "Hello, America." Tears, and she lived 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, and the first movie she saw was the Audie Murphy movie, and it was running on television, and I get a bullet right in the forehead. And my poor grandmother, who'd never seen television or a movie, went screaming to my mother, "Ruta's dead, Ruta's dead."
Okay, we're running just a little bit over, but we'll do a few questions.
No.
Back over here. Gentleman back here.
Ruta, I had a couple of questions for you. You'd worked with in a lot of series and everything else, and I wanted your impressions of the people there, the Adventures of Superman, Peter Gunn, Richard Diamond, Bat Masterson, Markham, with Ray Milland.
Wow, you're really mentioning way back stuff, and it was wonderful. I almost got kicked out of the union because one of my very first things was Peter Pan. My very first shows were with Burns and Allen. They were nice enough to take me on. And then I did a Superman, and I thought that was really good. And we had a little dance scene that the young man and I jitterbugging away, and I wanted to rehearse what we were going to do during lunch. And so the record player was there that we're supposed to turn on, and I grabbed the cord and started to plug it in the wall, and one of the grips yelled at me and said, "Are you in the electrical union?" And I said, "No," and he said, "Well, get out." But the guys were all wonderful, and Ray Milland, I mean, that's like you working with Joel McRae. We're talking about idols, and of course, I think I was too young and too stupid to appreciate how lucky I was. Now, in retrospect, I go back and I say, thank you, God.
One other thing.
Yeah, John.
7 Brides for 7 Brothers. Could you talk about it? Do you have any stories of the dance sequences?
Well, like I said, I think it was 8 weeks of rehearsal, and we shot the film, you'll be interested in this, in 2 processes. So it took longer than most films do, and films take time anyway, but we shot it in widescreen and CinemaScope. So when you have versions of it on your DVDs or whatever, I don't know whether they're widescreen or they're CinemaScope, so that took a lot of time, and all of it was just so wondrous. And the landslide, or the snow avalanche, that you see, unfortunately, they didn't take us. They just took extras up to Utah to shoot that. And we shot the landslide over Esther Williams' swimming pool. Now that's the magic of the movies.
Questions?
Great.
Okay, Steve.
He's adorable.
One thing Ruta did was have a whole history history on game shows.
Oh, yeah.
Being a contestant, I was just wondering what your favorites were, and do you have any game show moment that sticks out?
Yes, I love them all. But it was great fun being on the original Hollywood Squares, which I think is the only one that really made anything. And I had a question, or did I say this the other day? I had a question that was asked me about Dolly Parton's breast size. And I said, don't ask me. I have a tattoo on my chest that says, in case of rape, this side up. And standards and practices.
Not true.
Oh, true, Bobby. I wore so much rubber in my life. I said I owe my career to B.F. Goodrich. And darling Phyllis Diller said, Ruta, you've worn so much rubber in your life, you erased what little tits you had.
Since Steve mentioned the game shows, Mr. Fuller, you were on Hollywood Squares too, right?
Oh, yeah. I was semi-regular. Yeah, I loved Hollywood Squares.
And you had to pretend you didn't know the answer or something a lot of the time?
No, I was the best bluffer. That was my
Well, they never gave you the answers because that would be illegal.
Absolutely.
But what they would do is give you a word or a phrase that if a question came up, it would save your soul, but you never knew the questions. Never.
Okay, another question. This lady in the red down front.
I'd just like to ask about Ralph Waite and anybody you worked with him besides Jason.
Ralph Waite was a wonderful man, and we knew that all along. We miss him very much. I have to say that there were two memorials that I went to for Ralph, and one was at his home in Palm Desert, California, and then a second one. There were so many people that wanted to celebrate his life that a second memorial was held, and it was held at an AA meeting place in West LA. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Ralph was a long-time member of AA, and he actually joined right after we started the Waltons. And the reason being was he got this job playing John Walton, the good, upright, solid father, and he was still drinking at the time, and he said, I started thinking, I can't really come in and play this role when I've been out all night drinking and come in hungover in the morning and play this solid guy. So that's what made him decide to go to AA, and he did, and he stopped drinking. And the reason that I really wanted to go to this second memorial was because that was a side of his life that I knew about, but I hadn't experienced personally. So we had this lovely second memorial at AA, and there were so many lovely, wonderful, mostly older. I mean, I would say the age range of most of the attendees was probably 60s, late 50s through mid 80s, something like that. All old friends of Ralph's who had very wonderful, warm, funny stories, but also basically all got up and said, "This man saved my life." And it made me realize that there was a whole side and a greatness and a spirit to Ralph that I hadn't been exposed to. And this was a man who really, really, really helped many, many, many people, and literally did save lives. And at one point, Ralph ran, actually a couple times, for the House of Representatives,
yes,
would have represented Riverside County in California. And it's a shame that he didn't win, because he was such a good-hearted person. All he wanted to do was do good things for people, and he didn't care about being famous, and he didn't care about trying to make more money. He just wanted to do good things. And he was an inspiration to me because Ralph said to me once, I think, I don't know, maybe I was disappointed in myself or whatever because I hadn't played a scene as well as I would have liked, or there was something, I don't remember what. And Ralph said, I always just try to do my best, and then I just say to myself, I did the best I could at the time. And I thought, that's really great. And I think if we all do that, I think we can be satisfied with ourselves. I think that's a really good feeling.
Since Mr. Walmsley was talking about helping people, is it pronounced Thalians?
Thalians.
Went through my mind, which you've been involved with for a long time. Might you want to familiarize our audience with it if they don't know?
Well, Thalians is now 60 years old. And it was started by a group of young Hollywood people. Hugh O'Brien, Donald O'Connor, Debbie Reynolds, a group of young people who got tired of being called pot-smoking, hard-drinking idiots who contributed nothing to the world. And they said, we get together and we have parties and we sing around the piano and carry on. So why don't we invite people to come and sell tickets, and let's find a charity to give the money to. And so they sent out, God rest her soul, Jane Mansfield, to look for a charity. And she came back to the group and said, all the good charities are gone. and she said, but she discovered a man over at Mount Sinai Hospital working in a little trailer, and he was dealing with emotionally disturbed children. Now, an emotionally disturbed child is like a rotten apple in a barrel. You have that kid can just infect the entire community, the family, the community. So that's where the money first started going, was to emotionally disturbed children. Then 18 years later, we built our clinic, which was the first building that went in at Cedars-Sinai. And then we started dealing with mental health from pediatric through geriatric. But now, at this day and age, we have refocused our endeavors and our efforts, and we are very concerned with the mental health of our returning veterans, our wounded warriors. So, if you go to my website, go to where it says The Thalians, or just go to www.thalians.org, and you'll see what we're doing, and we're tied in with UCLA and their wonderful program called Operation Mend. Operation Mend tries to heal the broken bodies of our returning veterans, and we try to deal with the broken heart, spirit, and mind of our wounded veterans. So if ever you feel like you've got a few dollars to give away, send them our way to Operation Mend, and just look on my website, rutalee.com. It'll tell you what to do, and you will be rewarded for it. It'll see you into heaven. If not, it'll grease the slide down.
Also, if you tune in to my website, Tony Gill's, Bob Fuller's official website, you'll see the beginning of the WWP Wounded Warriors Project, and it will show you also where to donate to them.
Good. I think this is probably a good way to end the panel. This is a good way to end the panel. So thank you all very, very much.